What makes a country strong isn't just the battles it fights, but the reasons it chooses to fight at all. Canada's military story isn't one of empires or conquest. It's the story of ordinary people who stood up in extraordinary times to take, but to protect, to defend, and to bring peace where it was almost lost. In the War of 1812, Canada was not yet a fully independent nation, but a collection of British colonies. The conflict began between the United States and Great Britain, but the battles largely took place along the Canadian-American border, drawing Canadian militias into the heart of the war. American forces believed conquering parts of Canada would be easy, expecting that settlers in Upper Canada, many of whom were recent American immigrants, would side with them. However, the reality was different. Many Canadians, alongside British regular troops and Indigenous allies, resisted fiercely. Figures like Major General Isaac Brock and the Shawnee leader Tecumseh became central to early Canadian victories, including the capture of Detroit in 1812. These successes boosted morale and fostered a sense of unity among the colonists. Militia, forces made up of farmers, merchants, and settlers played an important role, often fighting in harsh weather and with limited supplies. Though they lacked professional training, their local knowledge and determination proved critical in defending towns and territories. The war featured several significant battles on Canadian soil, including the Battle of Queenston Heights and the Battle of Lundy's Lane, both of which showed the resilience of Canadian and British forces. Indigenous warriors were also vital, viewing the war as a chance to halt American expansion into their lands. Despite the destruction caused by the war, it ended in 1814 with the Treaty of Ghent, which restored pre-war borders but left a lasting impact. The shared defense experience began shaping a distinct Canadian identity, separate from both Britain and the United States. The war demonstrated that Canadians could stand their ground, and it laid the foundation for a growing sense of nationhood, forged not in conquest, but in resistance and survival against overwhelming odds. When World War I broke out in 1914, Canada, as part of the British Empire, was automatically drawn into the conflict. At the time, Canada had a small army, but the response from the public was swift and overwhelming. Over 600,000 Canadians enlisted, a significant number for a country with a population of about 8 million. These volunteers came from cities, farms, and fishing villages. Motivated by loyalty to Britain, adventure, and a sense of duty, the Canadian Expeditionary Force was formed and sent to Europe, where they joined the brutal trench warfare that defined the Western Front. In the early years, Canadian troops fought in major battles, such as the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, where they endured the first large-scale poison gas attack by German forces. Their ability to hold the line under such horrific conditions earned them international respect. As the war progressed, Canadian forces became more experienced and began to take on more complex operations. One of the most defining moments came in April 1917, at the Battle of Vimy Ridge in France. All 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps fought together for the first time and succeeded in capturing the heavily fortified ridge, where French and British forces had previously failed. This victory became a symbol of national pride and a moment often considered a key point in Canada's emergence as a nation on the world stage. Canadian soldiers gained a reputation for effectiveness, bravery, and innovation, particularly in the 100 Days Offensive of 1918, which helped bring the war to an end. By the war's conclusion, Canada had suffered over 60,000 deaths and many more wounded. But it had also earned a separate signature on the Treaty of Versailles and a seat in the League of Nations, marking its arrival as a more independent and respected global actor. When World War II began in 1939, Canada made a historic choice by declaring war on Germany independently, demonstrating its political autonomy from Britain. The country quickly mobilized its population and resources for a full-scale war effort. Over 1 million Canadians served in the military during the conflict, and thousands more supported the war through industry, agriculture, and civilian organizations. Canadian factories produced aircraft, ships, vehicles, and weapons, contributing significantly to Allied logistics and manufacturing. Canadian troops played important roles in several major campaigns. In 1940, Canadian soldiers were among those defending France during the ill-fated Battle of France, and were later stationed in Britain to prepare for future operations. In 1941, Canada participated in the defense of Hong Kong against Japanese forces, although the battle ended in defeat, and many Canadians were taken as prisoners of war. One of the most tragic and formative events was the Dieppe raid in 1942, where Canadian troops led a bold but costly amphibious assault on the French coast. Though a military failure, it provided valuable lessons for future operations. Canada's contributions were more successful in the Italian campaign beginning in 1943, where Canadian forces fought through challenging terrain and fierce German resistance. In June 1944, Canadians played a key role on D-Day, storming Juno Beach and pushing inland through Normandy. From that point on, they were actively involved in the liberation of France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, where they were warmly received as heroes. The Canadian Air Force and Navy were also vital, escorting convoys across the Atlantic and supporting bombing campaigns over Europe. By the war's end in 1945, Canada had emerged with a powerful military reputation, a strengthened economy, and a population that had shared in the costs and sacrifices of global conflict, helping to shape its post-war identity and role in international affairs. After World War II, global tensions shifted into the Cold War era, and Canada found itself drawn into a new kind of conflict in 1950 when North Korea invaded South Korea. As a member of the newly formed United Nations, Canada joined a multinational force to defend South Korea from the communist advance. Over 26,000 Canadians served in the Korean War, with troops, sailors, and airmen all contributing to the mission. Canadian infantry units, especially the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, saw intense combat, most notably at the Battle of Kapyong in 1951, where they held their ground against a massive Chinese assault, earning international recognition for their bravery and discipline. The war was fought in difficult conditions, rugged terrain. Harsh winters and brutal trench warfare made every gain costly. Canadian soldiers endured hardship alongside American, British, Australian, and South Korean allies. Although the front lines stabilized along the 38th parallel, fierce fighting continued until an armistice was signed in 1953. More than 500 Canadians lost their lives in the Korean conflict, and thousands more were wounded, marking it as one of Canada's most significant military engagements of the 20th century. Following Korea, Canada embraced a new role in international peacekeeping. Influenced by the vision of Canadian diplomat and future Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson, Canada began sending troops not to wage war, but to keep peace in troubled regions. Canadian peacekeepers served in places like Egypt during the Suez Crisis, in 1956, Cyprus in the 1960s, and various UN missions throughout Africa, Asia, and the Balkans. These missions aimed to monitor ceasefires, protect civilians, and stabilize post-conflict areas. Canada earned a global reputation as a reliable and fair peacekeeping nation, blending its military strength with a commitment to diplomacy and humanitarian values on the world stage. Canada's involvement in the war in Afghanistan began in late 2001, following the September 11th terrorist attacks and the launch of Operation Enduring Freedom led by the United States. As a NATO ally, Canada committed to the international effort to dismantle the Taliban regime and disrupt terrorist networks operating from Afghan soil. Initial deployments included special forces and air support, but the mission soon expanded into a full combat and reconstruction role. Canadian troops operated first in Kabul and then in Kandahar province, one of the most dangerous regions in the country. Over the course of the mission, more than 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces personnel served in Afghanistan. Their work included combat operations against insurgent forces, securing territory, training Afghan security forces, and contributing to infrastructure development such as building schools, roads, and medical facilities. The Kandahar deployment, beginning in 2006, placed Canadian soldiers at the center of some of the most intense fighting, including battles in Panjai district and Operation Medusa, which aimed to push back Taliban control. The mission was marked by constant danger from ambushes, improvised explosive devices, IEDs, and suicide attacks. Canadian forces faced not only military challenges, but also the complexities of working in a region with deep political, tribal, and cultural tensions. The cost was high. 158 Canadian soldiers died, along with several diplomats, journalists, and aid workers, making it Canada's most lethal military engagement since the Korean War. Despite the hardships, many Canadians viewed the mission as a test of national will and a demonstration of Canada's commitment to global security. The mission officially ended in 2014, transitioning into a non-combat training role before full withdrawal. The war left a lasting impact on Canadian military doctrine, veterans' care, and the public's understanding of modern warfare in a complex and changing global landscape in the 21st century. Canada's military has evolved to meet a wide range of global and domestic challenges, focusing less on traditional warfare and more on multi-role operations that blend combat readiness with humanitarian and peace support tasks. The Canadian Armed Forces (CAF) have been involved in numerous NATO and United Nations missions, reflecting a commitment to global stability, disaster response, and strategic alliances. One of the key areas of involvement has been in NATO operations. In Eastern Europe, particularly in response to tensions with Russia, Canada has led a multinational NATO battle group in Latvia under Operation Reassurance, contributing troops, equipment, and leadership to deter aggression and reassure allies. Beyond Europe, Canadian forces have supported counter-terrorism efforts in the Middle East through Operation Impact, which included airstrikes, training of local security forces, and intelligence sharing in the fight against ISIS. At home and abroad, the military has adapted to roles that require both hard power and soft diplomacy. Humanitarian assistance and disaster response have become central to modern operations, such as in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, where Canadian troops provided emergency aid, medical care, and logistical support. Similarly, the military has been mobilized domestically to respond to natural disasters like wildfires, floods, and the COVID-19 pandemic, offering essential services to civilian authorities. Modern operations also emphasize cyber defense, intelligence cooperation, and Arctic sovereignty. With climate change opening up northern passages, the CAF has increased its presence in the Arctic, conducting patrols and surveillance to assert Canadian control and support Indigenous communities. Canada continues to contribute to UN peacekeeping, albeit on a smaller scale than during the Cold War era. With missions focused on conflict prevention, electoral support, and civilian protection, these diverse operations reflect a military increasingly designed to serve both global missions and the complex needs of Canadian society. Throughout history, Canada's military journey has been one of transformation from a colonial militia, defending its borders in the War of 1812, to a modern multi-role force committed to global peace, security, and humanitarian aid. In 2 world wars, Canadians earned recognition not just for bravery, but for unity and sacrifice. In Korea and Afghanistan, they showed resilience and resolve in the face of uncertainty and hardship. Through decades of peacekeeping, disaster response, and international cooperation, they've helped shape a global identity rooted in responsibility and compassion. Canada's armed forces have never been defined by conquest, but by the values they defend: freedom, dignity, and the quiet strength to stand for what's right, even when it's hard. This history is more than a record of battles. It's a reflection of who Canadians are when called to serve not with fear, but with courage, purpose, and hope.